I just remember just trudging through, don't stop, don't stop. And I'm just aiming for the bank. If I can get up on the bank, then my toboggan is safe and I can go back and help people. I just remember just trudging through and being like, "I'll come back for you." Just these people have just fanned out in desperation, just stuck.
Welcome to the Wild Dispatch.
Hello and welcome to another episode of The Wild Dispatch. My name's Robin and I'm back with more... Oh, what is it? I forget what my latest iteration of this slogan is. With more wild stories from around the world. Let's go with that. I am excited to introduce a returning guest today. Kielyn Marrone was a fantastic guest. About 6 weeks ago, I think, we had her on. And we had a bunch of great conversations about her life and her experiences. She is an expedition guide far up north in Canada. She's also a skilled backcountry survival expert who was actually on the TV show Alone. She lasted a very long time. I think it was season 7. I've got written here, she's an absolute beast with a cheeky sense of humor. But she's also super humble as well. So the whole package. Kielyn, I'm clearly number one fan. So she's back, and this time she has gracefully agreed to share a bunch more info on something we surprisingly didn't talk too much about last episode, which was her experiences as a snowshoe guide. She runs Lure of the North with her husband, Dave, and they go out all over the place on these incredible expeditions, ranging from a week to even, I think one of their expeditions, which we talk about in this episode, was more than 70 days long. So we managed to chat about all of the nuances of what it's like when you are trudging, I think is maybe the word, but trudging through snow with snowshoes, just kind of in the tree line, just close to, well, not too far away from the Arctic Circle. So we're going to jump into this episode any second now. First, I want to say a big thank you to Kielyn for sharing more of her time, stories, and expertise. And I also want to take a moment to thank everyone who's listening. If you're new, then welcome. If you could just do me a favor and give the podcast a quick follow or subscribe, then you will definitely not miss any of the episodes when they first pop in on your feed, which is a little less consistent than it was previously. If you are an old timer, then as always, a quick review of the show. If you haven't done it already, then that would be amazing and appreciated. Please and thank you. That's a lot of talking. Well and truly, it is time for me to stop waffling and get on with the episode with Kielyn. Here she is now. Ooh, I know what happened. I muted you by accident. There we go.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Yeah,
You know,
still.
that's the magic sentence, right? Like when you're in a car and you're losing somebody, and all you need to say is, "Can you hear me now?" And then it's like, "Oh yeah, now I can hear you." Can you hear me now? Yep, got you.
Yeah, okay. It's the magic. It's the magic phrase.
Yeah.
I have to remember that one because I won't instinctively use that. Okay, well, if you are good to go, I think we can jump in. Um, yeah. Any other thoughts or anything to say or questions or anything beforehand? Are you good to go? I mean, you're happy,
Good.
happy in your quiet place now.
Take it away.
Welcome back, Kielyn.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you back. We
Yeah, likewise.
Well, I say we, that's the royal we, I guess just me. I just finished editing our last episode. which by the time people listen to this one should be live now. And I had,
Nice.
I got to be honest, I had so much fun just going through our chat beforehand. There were so many rabbit holes about your adventures and all kinds of observations about life. And obviously, your journey homesteading and your experiences with Alone and some elements of Alone that I'd never even thought about before. So that's very cool. There's also like kind of, I guess, a really good route that we took was about you being super tough. Although this is me claiming that, not you. You didn't say like, I'm a really tough person. This is why. But it was kind of, we talked through a lot of the things that kind of made you who you are and made you so determined, which is why you were able to endure so much in that experience out there in the, I guess it's like, I looked at it, it's like just subarctic kind of in the winter alone.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing I did realize is that there's a whole side of your life that you share with your husband, Dave, that we didn't end up covering as much as I would have loved to. And we kind of talked to this a bit in the last episode, but the whole expedition, winter, wonderland, multi-day, multi-week, snowshoeing, dragging sleds side of your life, like leading these expeditions, taking people under your wing and showing them the ways of the wild, cold environments that you go to. So I'm happy that you're back so soon, and I'd love to hear all about that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it is, I mean, it's a big part of my life. And like, it seems like when people want me to come on podcasts, it's like for one or the other, like Alone, or, well, three things, like Alone or the homesteading off-grid life or like the winter aspect of our company. And, it used to be like the winter camping was like, that's who we were. We were the traditional winter expedition experts. And that's like, that was our main staple, for our livelihood. And we specialized in not just taking people on the trips, but making all of the gear and clothing to go out and be comfortable in the wintertime. Um, and since then, we've really broadened our horizons with the homesteading stuff and the arborist work and the solar system installs for off-grid camps, and I do all kinds of homesteady stuff. But the winter has been really what has uh, made us stand out amongst the other outdoor professionals, because most outdoor professionals are summer based, right? It's canoeing, kayaking, hiking, that sort of thing in the summer times. And so, or even just like the primitive skills aspect of it. So the winter was something that we didn't like set out to start a company. It was just that Dave and we met at university and we're in Sudbury. So it was Northern Ontario. And our school year was 6 months of the year cold. So it was like, well, we love camping, but we don't want to stop camping.
Yeah.
Um, so, we did the typical cold camping that most people try, where it's just like, oh, I'm going to get a warmer sleeping bag, warmer boots, and sort of a little bit of a warmer tent, and then just go and basically carry everything on your back with tiny little snowshoes and just suffer the whole time. Um,
Because at that time of year, I guess it's extra hard work. I mean, carrying weight's hard any time of year, right? But if you're trudging through snow, I mean,
yeah, yeah,
like we're using
exactly.
snowshoes at that point. If you have like an extra, 60 pounds or plus maybe on your back.
Yeah, exactly. It's not efficient, it's not comfortable, and it's terrible. So it's like basically it's a form of like the moment you step out of your vehicle and onto the trailhead, you're just like the time the clock is ticking for you to break down and want to like come back for a hot shower. Um, so like we were just thinking like there's got to be a better way. and we took this course, winter camping in university, and the textbook for that course was, not your typical textbook that you would get, but it was a book written by a couple who live in Maine, Alexandra and Garrett Conover, the
Okay.
Snowwalkers Company, and they were, um, it was called Snowwalker's Companion, and it was all about the old way, the traditional way. Take the weight off your back, pull your gear on a toboggan, put traditional snowshoes on, uh, have breathable clothing with the moccasins and the anoraks. And we were like, okay, like so Dave, and in the back of the book, there's some rudimentary patterns to make your own moccasins and anoraks. And it's a fantastic book.
Yeah.
And so uh, Dave made his first pair of moccasins. And we lived in Sudbury at the time where we had a trail that we could walk our dog off leash, for an hour. And so he took the dog for a walk with his moccasins on, came back, and he was like, "Oh my God, Kylan, you have to make these. They're incredible. Like, they're so lightweight. You feel like you're wearing slippers. Like it just sort of changed his whole outlook on winter, like just with a pair of moccasins.
Yeah.
So Dave and I, like, he ended up making me a pair for Christmas. And then there was a symposium, a winter camping symposium. So this existed, this world of traditional winter camping existed, but it was very tiny. There was a small gathering of people up in, let's get those two states mixed up, Wisconsin or what's the other one? Not Michigan, maybe. I don't know. Anyways, one of those states
Yeah. I'm not
in
going to
the
hazard a guess.
in the UP.
Yeah.
And he bought a tent and a toboggan, and then we went out for our first trip. And rather than it being like 3 or 4 days, which is kind of what can suffer through cold camping, we went out for 8 days, and we were totally comfortable. So it's a canvas tent with a wood stove inside. You're cooking on the wood stove. You're drying your gear, hanging up in the tent. You're in your t-shirt and shorts, like
Yeah.
in the middle of winter.
And you were
It
pulling
just
stuff at
was,
that point. Sorry, did you already say that? But you
yeah, yeah.
dragging.
Well, he had one of the like uh more like traditional toboggans,
Okay.
and I just had like a little tub at this point.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
still, I got the gear off my back, and it just was a total game changer for us. So we started doing personal trips all over, and then
Can I ask a question?
our yeah.
I'm curious. You said that because this is something that stuck in my mind because you mentioned this before, that you did this course with, I think you said Garrett and Alexandra Canova, right?
Yep.
They were doing the course and they wrote this whole, like literally the expression, wrote the textbook
Yeah.
on this way of
Yeah.
life. So was that you were learning from those guys before this point now? So you were going and you'd like learned some things from them, or was there a practical element to the things that they were teaching you?
So they weren't actually the teachers of the course.
Oh, okay.
Um, yeah, so they were in Maine, so we had never actually met them,
Oh,
but like
okay. Okay.
we we read the book and memorized it and had been in contact with Garrett, and he's now a good friend of ours, and he actually has come on a trip with us.
Oh,
It was like
amazing.
kind of full circle. So they're like our mentors without ever like actually had met them and like gone to like learn from them. But their book was so well written, and then they were happy to sort of, talk via email or phone on like deep diving into topics.
Yeah.
And then we did from that book, we launched just into our own sort of R&D, and like trial and error and refining things. And so throughout the years, we, people saw our moccasins. They wanted to make their own. So we started offering workshops. And then people wanted to make more moccasins. So then we started selling like DIY kits. And then we would do snowshoe weaving workshops and toboggan making workshop. So all of the products that we use on trip, we would sell as DIY kits or teach workshops doing. And then people would make their kit and then come on a trip with us. And it was just this full circle of satisfaction, that you can be in this really harsh environment and look down at your feet and be like, I made these and my toes are cozy warm, and like, I'm floating on these snowshoes that I wove. And it's just a really holistic way of be interacting with your natural environment. And that got us really excited. Um, and you can go to some incredible places having the tools, literally the tools, to be out in nature for long periods of time in one of the harshest environments, that you can get thrown at.
You're like, yeah, well, do you know what? Let's do this for fun. Let's just go to this really savage environment and just thrive. I love it.
But the thing is like I don't like to be uncomfortable. Like I am not, like you might like roll your eyes or laugh about that. I am even just saying that, like, but I am not a sucker for punishment. I I like my tea. I like my cozy. I like being comfortable. And I'm okay with pushing myself, and I'm okay with being uncomfortable for the short term. But if this style of travel was like just torture, I would not be promoting it. It really is all about having the right kit
Yeah.
for the environment. Um, and the nice thing is that yes, you can make all of your own gear, and it's not cheap to make your own, but also you can go to a thrift store and find, a granny old sweater, a knit wool sweater. You can find, recycled wool pants, and like you can find a lot of the clothing just from your grandma's closet.
Yeah.
That would probably be thrilled to see it being revitalized.
In a very different environment.
Yeah, we rent a lot of our of the kit as well. So like you can rent a winter sleeping bag and a big down jacket and the snowshoes and the moccasins. So you don't have to
Yes.
um, kit yourself out to try it. So it's nice to, have that option.
It's not as much of an initial commitment if you want to just try dipping your toe. Well, probably not the right expression, but
Well, we do a polar plunge. So yeah, you would literally be dipping your toe
okay.
into the ice cold water.
More than your toe.
Yeah.
I have a question. I'm wondering, you were at this point with your husband. I'm not sure if he was your husband at that point, but you were experimenting, learning, trying a bunch of things out, all this gear, and developing. Well, I guess developing, but also making your own moccasins and having these adventures. Did you at that point have a plan that you were going to start guiding? That you were going to guide these trips? Like, was that a long plan on the horizon from very early on, or was it something after a while just happened organically?
Um, it happened quickly, but or also organically. Um, we didn't set out to make a company focused on winter travel, but Dave and I were both very entrepreneurial. Dave, yeah, he had already started Sudbury Outside, which was an outdoors club where he would orchestrate, events and trips for groups to gather and do. And I always knew that I wanted to have my own business. So, um, how the company came to be was through the moccasin workshop. So we
Okay.
had we had made moccasins. We started teaching our friends in our living room. And then our prof from the university had caught wind that we were making these moccasins and going on these trips. And he was like, "Will you host a workshop for me, my colleagues, and my family?" So we went over to his place and taught a workshop. And he, after the workshop, all of his friends were super excited, and and his name was Steven, and Steven, was like, "Oh, this is so great, but now we need to go on a trip like Dave and Kai do. Will you take us?" And he just sort of like pointed around the circle at his friends and just being like, "Are you in? Are you in? Are you in?" And that was like the birth of our first expedition. So we went home and started frantically like making more toboggans and like ordering a bigger tent and a bigger stove. And so then we had our first winter guided trip that was our professor and his friends. Um, and yeah, then it just sort of grew organically. We got some Ontario tourism attention,
Oh,
a
cool.
local author, Kevin Callan, he wrote an article about coming on a trip with us. We invited him on a trip, and yeah, so it just started to organically grow. And it started off with one trip a year, and then it was two trips a year, and then three trips, and yeah, then we end up guiding 72-day crossing of Ontario in 2022. So that was like we've sort of kept climbing. In extremes and lengths and things. But that 72-day trip, that was like, that's not going to happen every year. Like that was like a once in a lifetime kind of thing uh, for most people. We would consider doing another long trip like that, but it's just not an every year kind of thing.
Well, I mean, I saw some pictures in doing a bit more research about the snowy side of this this conversation, and was just, yeah, it looks so epic. And there's a funny thing about the imagery. I guess it's also because you're using a lot of traditional gear, but there's such a timelessness to those photos.
Yeah,
They're so iconic and so epic. It's just, you wouldn't be able
yeah,
to say what time it is. You can just look at it and be like, it's like this whited out kind of environment
yeah,
with, yeah,
yeah.
it looks amazing. I mean, yeah, those trips must be such an experience.
I think I know what photos you're talking about, where it's just like all of us in our anoraks with the like a whiteout blizzard.
Yes.
Yeah, that those images from that day are probably some of the best photos I've ever taken. And the environment, has all of like those images. I have the environment to thank for that. And it literally was a whiteout. What that was the last day of our crossing of Ontario when we made it to the ocean. And like it was so funny. Like we had spent 72 or 3 days, we were traveling to the Arctic Ocean, and this storm came in, and we're like, well, we've got to go. So what we ended up doing is get as close as we can. We were basically like at the tree line, and we weren't sure we were going to get any trees further up. So we didn't want to move our camp. So we decided to set our camp. I think it was 18 kilometers from the ocean. And so we set up a base, and we were just going to do a day walk out to the ocean and then walk back. So it was going to be a 36-kilometer day.
Wow.
And and we woke up and it was just wind and whiteout. So we brought one toboggan with our lunch and extra layers for people. And then we all just basically like walked with our heads down, just like leaning into the wind the whole day. And because we're all wearing white too, like we had to make sure we were like sticking together, and we had our compass out. We're just like following the compass. And then I think we had like our satellite device, and so we like did a pin to make sure, yep, we've crossed the border, we're in the Arctic Ocean now. And we just like looked around, and there was just, you couldn't see anything, so we're just like, yay, we did it. But like there's like no real landmark or
There
anything that
wasn't a
we could
sign.
yeah, no beautiful sunset over the ocean or anything like that. But it was it was pretty epic. It was an epic way to finish that trip for
Oh,
sure.
oh, epic is definitely the word. I wonder,
Hmm.
you talked about the last day, but there must have been many, many days. I mean, I know for a fact there were many days before that. Are there any other moments that spring to mind, like the ups and downs, highs and lows, learnings about doing such a long expedition?
Yeah, it was a tough trip, to put it lightly. Like, so we did it in 5 legs. Um, so the reason we chose that river system in particular, so we walked from Lake Superior, um, which is, so there's the watershed, right, where you pass over, and then all of the water to the south and to the west of you flows into Lake Superior. And then once you get over the height of land, the rest of the water is now draining into the Arctic Ocean. And the reason we chose that particular river system was because the train line that goes across Canada passes over the river. So there's no town, but the train passes over so we could get food drops. So it passed over the CP line, which is the Canadian Pacific, passed over the river, and then the CN line passes over, which is the Canadian National. So
Okay.
the train passes over the river. So we were able to get a food drop without it being a big interruption in the actual expeditions. We could still stay in the field. So we would arrive at the train stop, and it literally is a kilometer marker. Like, it's not, there's no station. It's like literally you tell the conductor, okay, I need you to stop at kilometer 338. And then they just huck the bags out, and then we just carry on. Um, and then we pass through one town. So yeah, the train passes over it twice, then a tiny little hamlet, which is literally a community center and a hockey rink and a gas station. And then we finished with another train crossing, and then the town of Moosonee, which is on the Arctic Ocean in James Bay. So that's why we chose that river system. And also, we had been testing that river. So we had been doing that river in sections. So it's like a perfect 2 or 3 week block of kilometers. So you would have 2 or 3 weeks of trip. And that's sort of like the perfect amount of food to be carrying at once, because otherwise it gets pretty beastly and heavy.
Okay.
So then we'd have to resupply. So we had already been building up this river and doing each section. Um, so the only section we hadn't done was leg 1 and leg 5. So we
Oh,
had already done legs 2, 3, and 4 just on their own separate 2 or 3 week trip. Um, so we knew the wild card was leg 1, which, we knew was going to be challenging. And then leg 5, we thought was going to be quite a bit easier because the river really opens up wide there. Like, it's like 3 kilometers wide, and there's not very many rapids. So we knew that that would sort of be the last sort of sprint to the finish. Um, and yeah, there were whole legs of the journey where it was just like, well, leg 1 was all about the cold, and then the slush coming up through the snow, and it being really cold because we started January 18th, which is, the coldest, darkest time of the year.
okay.
And so we were getting minus 30s and 40s, you know,
That's
frozen
that's
eyelashes. And
Celsius, right?
yeah, Celsius. Minus 40 Fahrenheit is the same as minus 30
Yes.
Celsius.
Okay.
Yeah.
Either way, very, very cold.
So it gives you an idea. Yeah. And yeah, so we had to come up with a lot of different strategies just to um, struggle through it. And then, of course, we're 13 people in 2 tents for 72 days. So, the human dynamic of everything, dealing with all of the ups and downs from, different people at different times, um, was in our heads going to be one of the biggest challenges.
And did it end up being tough? I can imagine when people are exhausted and in a like finding a new rhythm for such a long period, it's
Yeah.
like a change in lifestyle, isn't it? Then that's going to create some, the truth will come out in your personality. Maybe not the best parts of one's personality will come out. Say, "What? I sound like a posh English gentleman now." But is that so?
Yeah.
Did that become an issue like you imagined?
Not. Oh, hold on one second. Hank wants in. Just
Okay.
one second. He's gonna start barking if I don't let him in. Hi, come on in. Come on. Let's go. Now he's not sure if he wanted to come in.
They just wanted the option.
Yeah, exactly. He's just on standby. Yeah, so it didn't end up being a major issue at all.
Hmm.
Everybody was very respectful of people's space because there was such a limited amount of actual privacy that it was like if someone had to change, we had five women, six women.
Okay.
Yeah, so it was almost a 50-50 split. Yeah, I think we had six women and seven men, which was amazing. I was really happy for that because so when I first started guiding, it was very male centric. And I was, leading a group of men. And it was always really frustrating for me because, Dave and I work so well together as a team. We make all of our decisions together. But when a client would have a question, they would just ask Dave
Uh,
the question. And it was like, well, that's fine. Dave's gonna just ask me that question. We're gonna defer to each other. In my early 20s, that was really frustrating to me. But now I just laugh and be like, okay, he can deal with that. And I'm happy to, just do my own thing. I've got nothing to prove. But it was nice to have that many females.
did you share like there was like a lady tent and a male tent then, or you just mixed?
No, we just mixed. Yeah, we rotated positions in the tent every night because we didn't want to form cliques because we found in years prior when we would have like, okay, this is tent one, this is tent two. When it came time for like group chores and things, you would really see like, oh no, this is wood for tent two, or this is wood for tent one, or these are boughs for tent. So people would get like, I want to focus on my tent and that, you guys deal with your tent. Whereas when you're rotating through, it's just like all the camp chores need to get done and you don't prioritize anybody's over anything else. So it's very much like Dave and I are always watching for those little bit of social flags where we nip it in the butt like right away. It's like, nope, like we're all adults here. You would think you would be able to handle this, but no, everyone gets a rotating position in the tent so that it doesn't cause any sort of cliqueiness.
That's so
Um,
interesting.
mhm,
I guess it's
mhm.
human nature, isn't it? Do you want like everyone is it's ingrained to have your like crave a tribe, like to be like
Yeah,
this is the community this is my people I want to protect.
for sure. Especially in an environment when you're already uncomfortable, like that's one of the things that we say. Like one of the reasons why our trips are so long, like our minimum length of trip is 1 week, and that is intentional because we believe that the first couple of days you're still checking out of your real life at home. You're sort of putting those things to bed. Then you're also focused on, holy shit, it's cold, and like I need to like just focus on what my layers are doing and how they're working for me, and like figuring out, oh, how do I, okay, I can take this shirt off because I'm working hard enough that I don't want to produce excess sweat. And you're dealing with just like you're just focused on figuring out how do I stay comfortable. And then after day three, it seems to click for people and you can start like looking up and starting to enjoy your surroundings and the group that you're with. And you can really start to like dive into actually the experience of winter and all of its glory. And then usually people start checking out, sort of on the day before. they head back home, they start thinking about their to-do lists and their family and all of the things that they need to do. So if you only have a 4-day experience, that doesn't leave any time for the magic to happen.
Mm.
Um, so having that 7-day period where you're like, okay, you can actually sink into the experience is really important for us. Um, but going back to like or sorry, were you going to say something?
I've got a little question in my mind, but it's fine. You go first. Oh no, okay, you're about to
I
take
think
a
I,
slurp of coffee. Okay, I'll ask
I
the
just,
question. Well, go
okay,
on. What are you
yeah.
going to say? We're playing
I
tag.
just couldn't, I know, I was just going zigzag, zigzag, zigzag. Um, because yeah, there's so many elements of like the big trip, but then just our trips in general, and sort of the dynamic of it all. I think having that tribal spirit is something that um, the type of travel that we do is inherent to uh, the group dynamics. Is that because we all are in one or two tents and we all do group meals in one tent, you're all sharing in that sort of misery as well. Like if it's like a terrible, windy, cold day, like I'm not going to pretend that like winter is always just super magical. Like it can be a bitch. Like it's gonna, rip your face off if you're not careful. So like some days, yeah, like are much harder than others. And but you're all in it together, right? Like you set up this tent and you get that fire going and you at the end of the day you come in, you're served a glass of wine with a hot meal, we're baking cake, like it's luxurious out there. And once you're in the tent, first of all, you're ready to be in bed by 8 o'clock, but
Yeah.
secondly, like you get to laugh about the journey, and that really brings that tribal spirit together, and like you are all in it together, and it feels more communal than summer camping, because often summer camping, everyone has their little tents. Like usually you're in a 1 or 2 person tent. So at the end of the night, you go off, you've got all of these places you can escape to. So you're not like forced to socialize. We play a lot of games in the tent, and um, it makes I think any tension fizzle out faster
Yes.
because there's nowhere to hide,
Yeah.
right? There's nowhere to really brew it up. Um, and I feel like I'm a very perceptive person when it comes to group dynamics. Um, and I call people out on, like, okay, is there a problem? Like, how can we fix this? And rather than it doesn't even get to the point of confrontation, because it's just like, how can we work and make this, better? And we're all adults, like we can figure it out.
It must be a very valuable asset to have in that situation, because I can imagine if you maybe weren't quite as perceptive, or if neither of you were, then that would be like become a problem. Suddenly someone blows up over apparently nothing, which is the way it always works, right? Like you brood about a series of things that maybe feel much more important than they maybe are, or that's kind of the dynamic of how things often work.
Yeah, exactly.
It's funny you say, when you talk about that nature of everyone being in a big tent and there being no real escape when it's wintertime and it's super cold, you're not just going to go off on your own for a
Yeah.
walk in the dark or whatever it is, I guess. That's an assumption.
Hmm.
Correct me if I'm wrong on that one. But it really reminds me of, I grew up a lot around sailing, and my parents like adventured a lot in
Mm.
their sailboat all around the world now. They've since gone full circumnavigation and done all that stuff. Um, and there's the kind of a joke amongst people who are sailing together, which is like, you're going to learn pretty quickly if you get on in a
Yeah.
boat. Like, and it feels like there may be a similarity in that. It's like when you're in a very confined space, you can't just go off somewhere else. You just have to figure things out and find that rhythm
Yeah.
early on. And I think communication in the same way is a very important tool for that.
Totally. Yeah, it's exactly like that. And yeah, the only moments that you get to escape are, well, during the day, we travel in a line. So
Yes.
even though you're sort of bound to who's in front of you, who's behind you, you have a lot of time to be in your own head, to have your sort of own rhythm, even though you're all walking as a group and you're working together. And some days you're working so closely together, you're hauling each other's toboggans because you're going up and over portages. But when you get on a lake where it's just like, 20 kilometers of just that's it. There's no portage. All we have to watch for is slush and thin ice. Like you can just put your head down and just groove. Like you get into that. And so that becomes sort of your alone time, even though you're not actually alone.
Yes.
Um, and then the other time is when you have to go to the bathroom. And that becomes some of my favorite moments. It's like going poop in the woods in the winter because you're like, often we get started in the dark because we want to capitalize on as much travel time in the daylight as possible. So we're often packing camp in the dark. So you got your headlamp, you walk into this magical forest, there's snow laden trees, and you have your squat and we burn our toilet paper. So we have this like little bonfire and you're like warming your hands by your flaming toilet paper. Like, it's like it's like your opportunity to just have a little bit of that like personal time. Um, and like some days it's terrible because it's snowing, it's wet snow or whatever. Like it's not always nice, but sometimes it's like cold, crisp, clear,
Yeah.
stars are out or the moon is out, and like it really is magical.
It's like a meditation.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I can't remember if I answered your question or not.
No, I mean you're answering a lot of questions. I'm like I had a lot of questions in my mind, and you were like dinging them like a fruit machine. Like it's great. It's really good to go into a bit more detail around this stuff. I'm
What's a
curious.
fruit machine?
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's probably an English thing. We just lost like everyone. They're like, yeah, gone.
Like a vending machine?
Yes. No, it's a yes, it's a fruit. It's a vending machine for fruit. No, that's not a thing. Um, in England, in pubs, you always have in the corner like a gambling machine that has like spinning wheels that makes a lot of noise and drops coins loudly when people win. Right? I don't know if that exists.
Oh,
It's
like
like
a
a
slot
like a
machine.
casino machine, a slot machine. Yeah. Okay. They call
Oh,
that a fruit machine in because it's always like spinning fruit on the thing, right? Like if you get like three
got it.
cherries or whatever. Okay,
Got it.
that's one thing I didn't realize that people don't know what that is. You move countries to somewhere else, especially America, and speaking English, you'd assume that there's a lot more in common, but there's so many words and so much language which just isn't the same, and people are like, "What are you talking about?" That's
I
it.
mean, I was gonna let it just slide by, but then I was like, hang on a minute.
No, I'm glad you
Yeah.
asked. I'm glad you asked because you've done everyone a favor. So it
Yeah.
sounds like I already know the answer to this question that I wanted to ask, but it's a juicy question, and I couldn't resist. I'm imagining, the intensity of everyone on top of each other, and you're thankfully down to your high perception skills, you're able to kind of extinguish any fires. But I'm assuming in all the expeditions you've done, there must have been some beef, must have been some, like just two people that just didn't get along or anything like that. Did that ever happen? And did you have to kind of figure out how to manage that?
Well, thankfully we're all adults, so like if somebody just doesn't jive with another person, and that does happen, um, it's usually just a personality clash, and it's usually like one person's more talkative than the other. But
Uh,
we have like a strict no politics rule. We don't like we really try not to bring in politics. We try not to bring in religion. Like talking about religion is fine as long as it's in a positive way.
yes, like an open
Um,
way.
yeah, like oh, you're a different culture. Like just for education purposes. It's always interesting to learn about different cultures. But we really try and if someone starts going off on Trump or Trudeau or whatever, like it's just sort of like, no, we're not here. Like we're not here for that.
Yeah.
It's like let's all talk about things that we have in common. we're out here to have a good time, to put all of that behind us for a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks. Like, we don't need to bring that into here because the politics that matter right now are like who's getting firewood, who's getting water, who's cooking tonight, who's stoking the fire. Like, that's where we are. Like, we are here. Let's stay here. We don't need any of that. And so that really helps um, really eliminate most conflict because Dave and I, we delegate the roles and responsibilities for the day. And it really captures, encapsulates the simple life. And that's one of the things that I think people love most about our trips is that it really is like eat, sleep, walk, cut wood. It's like the book Chop Wood, Carry Water,
Yeah.
or something like that. Yeah, it's very much like these are the tasks that we have to do for the day, and there's really not much time for anything else. So, we play games, and yeah, like there really isn't much time for conflict because there's so much to do that we all have to work together that it's like the squabbles that end up happening are like how to pack the lunchbox. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's not, uh,
It's
there
not.
really isn't much time for that like deep conflict.
Yes. It's interesting. It feels almost primal what you're saying in
Yeah.
not the lunchbox argument. that could that could be as well. But yeah, there's like a primal element to how perhaps I'm speculating about how we used to exist where processes were far less efficient and you spend the whole day with very few functions and focus points. Your goal is find food, find shelter,
Yeah.
and keep the family alive.
Yeah.
And so I think that that's got to be part of the reason why that feels so good when you're in that kind of situation.
Yeah.
I remember talking with Joel from Alone, Joel Vanderloon. I never quite pronounce his name right, but I think that's how he pronounces it. And he talked a lot about being with the Hadza people and that kind of simplicity. And it's worlds apart, literally worlds apart, but well,
Yeah.
not literally worlds apart, but the other side of the world, I guess, and different temperature and different kind of environment. But that simplicity is there, like a very
Hmm.
a common community goal that is utterly
Yeah.
focused
Yeah.
is yeah,
Yeah.
it's interesting.
Yeah. And it is vital. Every task is a vital role in keeping our group safe and comfortable. And so some roles take more physical effort than others, but they're all equally as valuable. So one of the best things about our trips is that it's a self-equalizing system. So we have people, like a lot of people ask me, like, who comes on your trips? Like, why are people signing up for this? Um, and it's people from across the gambit. Like, it's young people just out of school. It's people well into their retirement. It's women. It's men. People from all walks of life, and all professions. We have from school teachers to lawyers to janitors to carpenters to nuclear power plant people. Like, it's everybody. And um you don't get like often a group of people with such sort of diverse backgrounds coming together to like make this well-oiled machine. And so you've got really strong people who could haul a toboggan, one of the heaviest toboggans, and then you have somebody that needs a lighter toboggan. But and then you might have somebody that gasps out as soon as you get to camp, or somebody like the Energizer Bunny that just keep going all day. Um, and you can shift weight from toboggans. Like, the person who needs a lighter toboggan just gives weight to the person who can take more weight, or like even I was saying we all kind of walk in a line most days. Well, the people at the front of the line have a much harder job than the people at the back of the line because they're packing snow down. So we just position people in the line where it's like a self-equalizing system. When
Okay.
somebody at the front, somebody at the front gets tired, they move to the back to have a little bit of a break, and then the next person takes over. And then same with that camp, usually chopping wood and getting the boughs are the more physically challenging jobs. So someone else will get the water or put the tent up or install the stove or lay the boughs. So or cook the dinner. So um it really is for everybody because we can just shift jobs around. And sometimes that means that Dave and I do more work, depending on how strong the group is. But like that's what we live for. I don't mind chopping wood, until it's done, like in the dark with my headlamp on, um, because that is working towards the group having a comfortable, enjoyable time. Um, and so some trips are harder for Dave and I than others. Um, there's one trip that I did this past winter. I felt like a queen. It was all men. So it was a group from the UK, and I led it with a co-instructor from the UK, and it was all men, and most of them were like 6'2", 6'3", and just lived for getting wood and chopping wood. And I was just like, I don't even know what to do right now. Just sort of sat back and been like, yeah, okay, yeah, we need a little bit more wood for that tent. We need a little bit more wood for that tent. And just took pictures. So I was like, okay, this is great.
I'm sure being from the UK, everyone was terribly polite as well.
Yeah, and they just loved, I mean, people from the UK just love Canada so much. Like they just was like blown away by the vastness and um yeah, I love when the international groups come over because it puts things in perspective for me. Like, I mean, I tickle myself every day just thinking about how lucky I am. That sounded really funny. I think the expression is pinch, not
But
tickle.
yeah, but maybe tickle's more appropriate.
Yeah. Just how lucky I am. And but when the internationals come over and they're just like, oh, like wow, it really just makes you be like, yeah, this
Yeah.
is special.
And that's a great thing, isn't it? Sometimes seeing through other people's eyes is a really good way to appreciate what you have. And I can definitely relate to that because when I go back to the UK now, it's really funny because I look around and everything's so quaint and small, and the houses are so tiny, and the roads are so close, like the lanes are so close to each
Yes.
other, and it's so funny all those things that were my absolute norm for 30 years, and then moving
Yeah.
over to the US, and suddenly everything's so big, and the scale is
Yeah.
so huge, and the parks that I'm in are so big, and there's so much wild space that you can travel through
Hmm.
without seeing a single person.
Yeah.
It makes it quite hard in my mind. I'm not sure that I could go back to smaller spaces again because I'm
Yeah.
so used to that enormous wilderness, and it must be even more extreme for you because you are in an even huger wide open spaces. I mean, I'm in California and there's some big wild spaces here,
Hmm.
but yeah, where you are, it's enormous.
Hmm. Yeah.
I
Oh,
got it.
I'm definitely spoiled.
Well, I mean, but spoiled, but clearly enjoying it. You're tickling yourself about it, so
Yeah.
uh, I've
I
got
think I'm
a.
blushing.
um, so something I wanted to ask about. I mean, this is probably all trips, but maybe off of the thing when you were talking about your big 70 something day trip, you were talking about the food supply drop offs. What was the kind of food that you were eating? Do you always have the same kind of thing? Is it in my mind? I'm imagining there's some beaver content in that food.
Yeah, so on our more local trips, we eat a lot of beaver. So for some context, I don't know if we talked about this in the first episode, but
We do,
like
yeah.
I'm a trapper. Yeah, okay. So our freezer's full of beaver. So most people that come on our trips know that about us, and they're always like, "Can we try the beaver?" And so we do offer it as an option on our more local trips, but on the more remote trips, we use freeze dried food.
Ah,
So
okay. It's lighter.
we yeah, much lighter. We buy them in individual. Like we don't buy those packets that are pre-assembled. I buy like a number 10 can of an individual ingredient. So I'll
Yes.
buy cans of, peas, corn, carrots, meat, and then I'll pre-assemble the meals in at home so that, it's like a light bag of like day one shepherd's pie, and it's just like basically add water. And
Yes.
it's super, super easy and light and um, yeah, so, but I can make some pretty amazing meals out there with the freeze dried food. So it's like, yeah, shepherd's pie, your kind of standard pastas, but then we do like a salmon Alfredo, we do like a tikka masala, we do Thai curry. Like, we're eating pretty,
Yeah.
I don't think so. I've like on a 2 week trip, I don't do a repeat dinner. Like there's 14 different meals. And then our breakfast, I think I have 9 breakfasts before I have to do a repeat. So it's not like we're eating like gruel for breakfast and plain pasta for dinner. Like it's pretty wholesome.
I think it's also, I mean, yeah, that makes absolute sense. And it also, all the things that you're saying sound like the perfect food. I know that if I was doing a trip like the ones that you're describing, I know for me, I would obviously be pushing myself hard because I love to suffer, but burning thousands of calories, no doubt.
Yeah,
It's that kind of food that when it's been a long day, you're tired, physically tired, you just want to hoover up lots of that food, get those
yeah,
calories in, and it's going to be the best. I mean, I sometimes think the best meals you ever have are after a really hard day's labor,
yeah.
where you've earned that meal. It's the best.
Oh yeah. It definitely works in my advantage that like nothing tastes bad on a hungry stomach. But I do I like to think that the meals are actually good, like even if you weren't like just starving. But yeah, but I mean, it is a bit of a joke that like how much we eat on these trips. Like, okay, let me break down a day for you. So
Okay.
yeah, like you said, you're eating like 3 or 4 thousand calories, or 4 or 5 thousand calories, more like it in a day. So like in the morning we have our big breakfast. Normally it's like something like Harvesters, like potato, bacon, and cheese, and onion and mushrooms, something really that's going to stick to your sides. And then so that's usually at around 7. And then by 10 a.m. we've stopped for our first tea and flapjack. So we actually have a like
Sounds so
yeah,
good.
flapjacks are like a huge, you would know what a flapjack is because you're
Yeah.
from the UK,
Love it.
which is where we got the recipe. So one of our participants, Justin, came on our big long trip and brought flapjacks, and we're like, what is this? And can I get the recipe? So we do flapjacks for break one and some tea. And then we have lunch, which is 2 sandwiches, so a meat sandwich and a PB sandwich, and soup and a full size chocolate bar. So that's our lunch. Then in like another 2 hours, we stop for another bar and tea, or usually hot chocolate with like butter in it or coconut oil. And then when we get to camp, we have appetizers. So as soon as the stove is set up, we're throwing like meatballs and samosas and like spanakopita on the and like deep fry them so that we have a little bit of boost of energy while we're finishing splitting the wood and all the other camp chores. And then we feed them a giant bowl of whatever, and then we have dessert, which is usually like a cake or brownies or other chocolates and stewed fruit. And then on top of all of that, everybody gets a 500 ml container that we snack up. So with nuts and fruit and chocolate, so that in between those feeding times, if you're still a little bit hungry, you could chug your snacks whenever you want. So like that snack bottle alone is, I think, about 1,800 calories if you fill it with like walnuts and, the high calorie foods. So you could, yeah, like you're just eating constantly. But you need it. Like
Yeah.
it's just, you don't feel like you've overate by the end of
Yes.
the day.
And I think that's a thing. I mean, I used to do a lot of racing, like endurance bike races, multi-day.
Hmm.
Certainly not nearly the standard of the Tour de France, but like mimicking in some capacity that kind of multi-day event. And the thing is, when you're
Yeah.
working, physically working, even from the beginning of that race, after every 30 minutes, I would have to eat like a 200 calorie bar. And it's like
Hmm.
you don't feel hungry at that point, but you need to keep eating because otherwise you're going to get problems at like in hour 4 or 5 of the race. That's when you're going to be flagging. And I'm sure it's just the same thing when you're pulling heavy weight and it's really cold. And I think that's a big factor as well,
Hmm.
right? If it's super cold, your body's working much harder than you think just
Hmm.
to kind of keep warm. If that, I'm guessing.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, your clothing helps with that, but certainly like if you're producing a lot of excess heat, then you're going to shed the
Oh
layers,
right, yeah, okay,
but so you're not necessarily working that hard, but I think I think psychologically it's as much as actual physical because you just feel like you kind of like a little bit tenser. So maybe your
mm,
body is actually burning a little bit more just to sort of like make sure that you're still on guard. That's a topic that like Dave has a lot to say about. I was like, no, you're not burning more calories, but it just depends on if you start shivering, you're definitely burning more calories. Um,
yes,
but if you're wearing the right clothing, you shouldn't actually be burning more calories just because it's cold out.
yes.
But it's harder to move when it's cold out. Like you're usually it's deep snow, and so you're just inherently burning more calories just by moving.
That's a good point. Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, and the whole layering thing is a whole thing that we can talk about too. One thing actually though I wanted to ask you about is the firewood aspect. You talked about this before, I think, in the previous episode. This might be a stupid question, but I'm going to ask it. I mean, obviously, um, two things, I guess. Cutting the firewood every evening means that you have the fire for the stove and to heat the tent. Is it a very dry environment that you're in then? It's just so that the wood is it's just going to burn. Like you don't have any issues with that stuff. I guess I'm coming from an environment where it's pretty soggy, so
Yeah. Yeah. So one of the reasons why the clothing systems work so well, like the moccasins aren't breathable. We're touting breathable. Did I say no? They're not waterproof. Sorry.
yes,
I think I just said they're not breathable. They're very breathable,
yes,
and all of our other layers are breathable as well. And that relies on a dry environment. So even though we're covered in a blanket of snow, it's dry. So there's not a whole lot of extra moisture that's kept in that snow. Um, and so if you dunked your foot into a puddle of slush, so slush gets insulated. Snow is a really good insulator. So when it snows really deep, that is heavy and it puts pressure on the ice, creating these little micro cracks. And then it presses down, so the water has to go somewhere. So it shoots up into these little cracks in the ice. But then because the snow insulates, that water just sits on top of the ice like that and doesn't refreeze. So if you step down into the slush, and so the snowshoes often keep us on top, even if there's slush underneath, um, you'll still float on top. But if you put your foot down into the slush and you lift your foot up and your moccasin is wet, if you rub that dry snow on your moccasin, it dries it out. So that's how we can get away with these like non-waterproof footwear in this environment. We do have backup rubber boots, and they're like a natural rubber, so they don't crack in the cold, and they just roll up, and you just stow them away in your backup bag. So if you do end up standing in slush for long enough, then your feet will, it'll absorb, and your feet will get wet, and you'll want to change them out. But the firewood that we procure is always from standing dead wood. So we're never taking anything that's already fallen over, because as soon as it has any sort of angle on it, then the snow or the rain hits it and then just absorbs it like a sponge. That's going to be wet. But if it's standing vertical and there's still a top on the wood, then the water just sheds down it and it actually hardens and dries really nicely. And there's different species that we prefer. And so it's like a whole big thing on like how to learn how to ID standing dry firewood.
Yes.
That's like one of our expertise and like what we believe really makes or breaks, your night. If you don't have good wood, they say an army marches on their stomach, but an army can't march on their stomach until they have good firewood to cook their food. So an army marches on dry wood in our world. Um, so yeah, it's a whole thing on how to find standing dry firewood, which most people who be like, oh, I grew up in the bush and oh, I could, yeah, it's super easy. It's like most people that grew up in the bush cut their firewood and then season it in a woodshed.
Yes.
So being able to just get dropped anywhere in the world and find standing dry firewood is harder than it might sound. Um, and I've stumped many a bushman who think they know what dry firewood looks like.
It's so interesting. I guess I mean, yeah, I've always thought in my head, and this is probably exactly the thing. So everyone thinks that they know it until they're put in the situation where they really need to figure it out.
Yeah. Well, in the summertime, like it's easy because yeah, you can take wood that's just fallen over, break a branch here, but because you're just doing an outdoor fire. And if it's a bit smoky or a bit sizzly, like just add more wood and you're fine because you're in an outdoor fire pit or whatever. But when you only have a limited space in your wood stove, you have to boil water for 12 people. You have to dry all of your gear. You have to cook dinner for 12 people. Like you need that wood to just go up with a match, and stay lit and stay hot. And, you know, yeah, it's a whole thing.
So one other thing that I was also wondering about is when I was looking through some of the pages on your website on Lure of the North. Actually, we should ask that question in a second too. Mental note. There's a great story behind that name, I'm guessing, but it's a great name in itself. But the thing I was going to ask is I saw a picture with a lot of you guys. I think it was actually with Jordan from Alone as well, although I couldn't see most of his face because he had a bark, a piece of bark, I think it was, over his face, along with everyone else,
Snow
with just
goggles.
little slits in the bark. Can you tell me what was going on in that picture?
Yeah, so those were our sort of primitive snow goggles. So that is how the Inuit would make their snow goggles, often out of like whale baleen, which is super cool. So like whale teeth are actually more just like sheets. I don't know if you've ever seen that,
No.
but like they'll, yeah, so they or like mop mop broom sort of squeegee things. And so you can actually dry them out and there's this like hard like bone. And then you just like there's lots of different replicas of them out there where it's like dots. So you could do like a little like 9 dots that you would just poke out, or you could do slits. And that's basically to when you put them on, it's amazing how well you can actually see through them, but it helps prevent any of that solar reflection off of the snow bounce up and harm your eyes. So,
And
in the
that's
summertime,
is that snow blindness?
everything,
Is that what causes
yeah.
it? So it's
Hmm.
like so
Hmm.
people literally, if you're walking around in that kind of very white, bright environment, have you experienced that? Like it really dings your eyes and you can't see properly? What's that like?
Hmm. Yeah. So, I've never actually had snow blindness, but because I always have a backup pair of sunglasses, like I live with sunglasses on my face all year round. and I always bring it back up in case I lose or break one of them. Often I end up giving them out to participants because they'll be like, "Oh yeah, I saw it on the list, but I didn't think it was important." It's like, no, 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 this is really important because it's a real thing, especially later into the year, like late February into March, when the sun starts to get higher. It reflects more off of the sun or off of the snow, and even on cloudy days, you can get it. So I've never actually had it, but it literally burns your retina. And we had one girl on one of our high north trips. It was like a cloudy day, and she wasn't wearing her sunglasses, and at the end of the day, her eyes were like burning. And so basically, we had to just kind of keep putting cool pads on her eyes. She just had to keep her eyes closed for most of the evening. And when we got into town, they gave her eye drops, and I can't remember. She had a minor case of it. It was a while ago now. I don't remember if she ended up having permanent damage, but you can get permanent damage
Oh,
from that.
really?
Yeah.
Wow, it's so yeah, so much, so many things in an harsh environment like that that you have to be aware of.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
I guess with the
But
cold as well. I mean, obviously we talked a lot about layers and keeping warm and being aware of that. You being perceptive, I guess you kind of can sense if people are, I don't know, if they're getting a bit quieter or if something's going on. Like, have you ever had to kind of pull people out and just check them because you're worried about frostbite or anything like that? I mean, what's the kind of signs of something going bad with that kind of situation with people getting a bit cold?
there's a lot of posturing, like, people, shrivel up a little bit, and yeah, they'll get quiet. And um but I'm a cold person, especially after alone. My hands and my feet are very, very sensitive to the cold. And so I'll be the first one to be like, I'm fucking freezing. Like I need a hand warmer or something, or like, let's keep moving because I'm getting cold. So I try and de-egotize. I don't think that's the right word, but
Yeah.
like just try and like make it so that if you're cold, say something, because like it's okay. Like it's cold out. Like people get cold. So that kind of thing is just like, yes, speak up. And so by me being like, I'm freezing, like I'm gonna do this, or like I'm hungry, I'd like to eat, that kind of thing. Like I'm very open about that. I'm not very like hard stoic when it comes to just acting like a tough girl. Um, so that helps people just feel comfortable being like, actually, you know what, I am cold, and that sort of thing.
I can see how that would be useful disarming whatever perceptions
Yes.
people have because you got to imagine like, oh, I mean, I'm sure they're impressed as well. They're like doing an expedition with someone who was on a TV show and like, lasted for a long time, and you don't want to be
Hmm.
seen as a wuss.
Yeah, exactly.
So I can understand why people would be like, oh no, I'm just going to suffer through. But the trouble is, I guess in an environment like that, if you suffer a bit too much, then you can end up getting yourself into a bit of trouble, I'm
Yeah.
guessing.
And I call people out on that as well. Like yeah, like I said, I'm fairly perceptive when it comes to things like that. So I think by either A, showing that, like helping disarm them by me kind of expressing any sort of discomfort, or just bringing awareness to that. But then also to be like, hey, like, you look cold, or like this, that, and the other thing. One of the biggest things actually is feeling like that people can't ask for help. Like if their toboggan is too heavy for them, they often will come up with a lot of different excuses. Oh no, it's not the weight, it's just my snowshoes, or like, oh, it's not the weight, I just I'm not feeling great. It's like it's always the weight. Give like Unload your toboggan. Like, we can reallocate gear, Um, it's like if someone's falling further and further behind. It's like, here, let me pull your toboggan for you for a minute so you can catch your breath. No, 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 I'm fine. It's like, you're not fine because, the group is way over here and you're falling behind. And so one of our talks that we give like on night one is about accepting help because this is a group activity and we won't accomplish our goal if you are being stubborn and won't accept help. Um, and that is hard for people. We've had many people just sort of like uh, feel like if I accept help, I'm accepting that I am weak and that I am not able. So that's like a barrier that a lot of people, I think, unconsciously have.
Yeah, that must be interesting. It's so much more complex than you would imagine of just okay, we just have to get these people through this environment. It's also balancing all of the emotional issues and subtle things that maybe don't come to a fore until you're in that environment, and
Yeah.
then you've got to realize what's the actual real problem here. Which
Yeah.
that sounds like it must have been a bit of a learning experience in itself, when you
Hmm.
started your company. I mean, did you find that when you were learning, excuse me, when you were learning at the beginning of this whole process, that it was a little trickier at the beginning to just gauge things? Immediately you're talking about body language changing, or all those kinds of things. It must have been a bit of a learning curve when you're figuring out what's going on with people. Like I can feel like something's not quite right, but I need to figure out what that is.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's all like you gain experience as you go. And um, yeah, I think just having done so many kilometers now, so many days, so many different groups, Dave and I have come up with quite a hefty toolbox of like, oh, this strategy needs to be, put in motion here, and um, let's just change the plan altogether. And yeah, it's fun. It's a part of the problem solving that I like.
For sure.
Mhm.
I've got a couple of little notes here. So I'm just gonna, if you don't mind, I'd love to just like kind of steer us in those directions. We kind
Yeah,
of reached some of those things before, but I love the name of your company, Lure of the
thank
North.
you.
How long ago did that happen? Like, what is there a story behind that? Who came up with it, or did was that like early on that you came up with that brand?
Yeah, I mean, it was right off the hop. Dave and I read a lot of, well, we read a lot. And back in the day, we were reading a lot of adventure novels. And this was a book that we both read about the last unmapped area in Newfoundland, or Labrador, sorry. And, of course, First Nations people have lived there for centuries, but it hadn't been, mapped. And so this writer goes, he wants, he's a little bit of a has been writer. He needs to reboot his career, and he thought that, oh, going to the last untouched wilderness, um, would make a great story. And he hired a native guide, and him and his friend went on this canoe trip to like make it to Ungava Bay in the Arctic Ocean. And it was a tragedy. One of them died, and it turned into this whole saga because then he got a lot of flack for like just being really ill prepared. But then his wife went back and redid it with the exact same packing list as he had, and it was just unforeseen circumstances. Anyways, it was a really beautiful story, that just lured us to that environment. And the book was called The Lure of the Labrador Wild. And when we go on these winter trips in the North Woods, we really feel that pull to the north. And so we just like put the two together, just Lure of the North. It could be the Lure of the North, but just like the Facebook, you got to drop the.
It's true. It's true.
Yeah. So yeah, that was for us like, The Lure of the Labrador Wild. It's a great book. I recommend it. But yeah, we felt that in us about just the North.
Yeah. You also have
Hmm.
a bit of a story behind the logo as well, right? Like there's some aspects of
Mm.
it which I thought was quite cool. Did you design the
Yeah,
logo or did
yeah.
you work with someone?
We worked with somebody, yeah, like we kind of gave them the name, like sort of just the idea of what we love about the winter, and so yeah, the cross is the tripod for the stove, and it also represents the tent, and then we have a mug on top, because we find that just like on in a really harsh environment, you can be like in a headwind trudging, just feeling like you're not going anywhere, and then you round the corner into this protected bay. We all stop and have a tea together and laugh about how hard it is or whatever. And then of course the snow laden spruce tree. So it's just comfort and warmth in a harsh environment.
Hmm. Yeah.
Hmm.
It's great. I mean, like, I remember seeing that logo on your headband in
Mm.
on the show alone, first of all, and I think that was the thing that made me look it up, and I loved that
Hmm.
logo for a long time. So it's nice to ask about
Thank
it.
you. Yeah.
I have something written here: accidental ice plunge? Question mark.
Like, have we had them?
Yeah, and I'm sure this would not be a common event, and I don't want to in any way put you in a position to feel like you're fear mongering people in any way. But I'm sure in that kind of environment, I guess I'm
Yeah.
curious. You prepare for that kind of thing by doing ice plunges before. You said to me in the last episode, yeah, it's good so people
Hmm.
know what's going on in case it happens. Is there a
Hmm.
story of it happening to you, maybe the first time, or something that springs to mind?
We do get on occasion. We like to call them punch throughs,
Okay.
um, and not like I fell through the ice, because often what happens is it's where we anticipate it already being thin. So it's not like it just happens in the middle of the lake and you're just like, holy shit, there's no ice there. Like it doesn't happen like that. Experience reading the ice, and there's a lot of signs to look out for where you might find weak ice. And so anytime that somebody does punch through, it's it's where we've already been like, okay, weak ice here, weak ice there, like, and people either A, don't listen, um, or B, just, have bad luck. But we have we use a simple hiking pole with a carbon tip as our probe. Um, a lot of people will ask like, oh, like, do you stop and check the ice with the chisel or your axe? Like, no, there's no time for that. Like, if we stop to like make a hole, like a legitimate hole, um, every 5 feet, you wouldn't get anywhere.
Yeah.
But you can tell a lot by the sound that your pole makes as you're probing. So just by listening and feeling, just probing with the hiking pole, if the hiking pole doesn't go through, it's going to be safe for you to walk on, without having to actually stop and check how many inches there are. And often when people punch through, it's because we say, okay, follow our exact snowshoe path because this is where we've probed. And someone takes 2 steps to the right. It's like, oh, we told you, like,
Yeah.
there's weak ice right there.
Yeah.
And it's often very, very shallow creeks where that is the case. Like sometimes we literally will be weaving our way like up in and out of these like holes all over the place, because we need to get to the next portage. And it's often very, very shallow creeks. So the water level in the wintertime drops significantly. And so even if like your pole goes through, you see, oh, there's the gravel bed right there. Like there's no water. So those situations we think are very low risk punch throughs.
Yes.
When it's like, but we'll go on like class 3 rivers where yeah, it's like flowing water underneath. Um, and that's when we like take it, we're very methodical. And often there's what's called shelf ice. So when the water level's high, then the ice freezes and then the water level drops. Ice will have bonded to the shoreline and create these shelves, which are very stable and often quite thick. So often there'll be like a raging river right next to us, but we'll be up on this shelf ice, like weaving along the shoreline. Um,
So you can see the river next to you.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Like on some of the big rivers, yeah, you're navigating, a rapid. And sometimes we go right through the middle of it. Um, up and over the shelves and that sort of thing. So, um, yeah, it's quite and Dave and I have the skill to do that, to be able to like actually read the ice. We would never recommend someone just do that on their own. But it is it's pretty amazing like where you can go if you know how to read the ice. Yeah. And
Yeah.
so it's, sorry, as far as the punch throughs go, like, or breakthroughs, it's usually somebody's foot, and that's why we call it a punch through. So it's just like, oh, your foot like kind of drops down, and you can usually either just step aside or go back the way you came. Like it's rare that it's just like plunge right through to your chest and like, oh, like now I'm swimming.
Yes.
It just doesn't happen
That's not how it
like that.
works.
No.
Interesting. There's a couple of little expeditions. Well, I say that's little is very diminutive, and they certainly weren't little at all. So I don't know why I said that, but little notes, I guess, I've got here about expeditions. And one of them is I saw some photos, I believe, and some notes about a trip, and I might be pronouncing this wrong, but Killarney. And I think
Hmm.
at some point there, I think the ice was melting, so you ended up actually having to drag the sleds up over some of the hills and and
Yep.
that kind of stuff. Can you tell me a bit about that? It sounds
Hmm.
like that suddenly changes the nature of what kind of trip you're doing, and it becomes a lot harder work if you're having to drag things uphill.
Yeah, for sure. Portaging is very challenging, especially if, yeah, you've got to go up over mountains. Um, and yeah, I mean, our Ontario mountains are not Rocky Mountains, but still steep for a heavy toboggan. And so, yeah, anytime the route changes, our ideal is to stay on the waterways, just like a canoe.
Yeah.
It's the exact same thing as a canoe trip where you're traveling on the lakes and the rivers, and then when the lake ends and you got to get to another lake, you got to hop over the portage, and sometimes that means steep terrain. And yeah, that the portaging is actually one of my favorite parts of the whole trip because I thrive on powerful movements. So like I like lifting heavy things, short bursts of energy. That's where my body thrives. Whereas like the long distance running, that kind of thing, like that's not really my forte. And one of the other things I love most about the portages is the scenery. You can be out on a lake where it's just like howling wind, and then you get into the portage and it's just dead calm. The snow is bending the trees over the trail. There's all these like little birds that start popping up to say hi. You see all the moose prints and like it's just this like it really feels like this winter wonderland. And then like it's still windy, so like the tops of the trees are blowing snow, and so it's sort of like snowing sideways like through the trees. Um and then it's so quiet, like it's like deafening quiet. um and you're just like weaving, and often the snow is so deep, like if it's a foot out on the lake, like it could be 3 feet in the bush. So you're basically trenching your way through this portage. um and the teamwork, you basically you try, and we always say like if there's 12 toboggans out on the lake, it's 12 individual toboggans. As soon as you get to a portage, it becomes 12 group toboggans. You no longer have your own toboggan. It's like we have 12 portage 12 toboggans and they all need to get from A to B. And so you pull your toboggan as far as you can, and as soon as you get to an obstacle, you stop and either A, there's someone behind you to then pair up or triple up on one toboggan to get it up and over the hill. Or if you can't make it up the next hill, you go back and get another toboggan. So you're like leapfrogging the toboggans through the portage. And at the end, you collect your sweaters and your hats that you've ditched on somebody else's toboggan, or like you drank their water, ate their snacks. Like, it's very much like a stop, start, leapfrog team effort. And sometimes we need the whole group to like, we pull out the ropes and we get the pulleys out, and we go over some pretty steep hills. And this is the time where we see who packed their toboggan properly in the morning. It's like things start getting dumped out on the trail as they go, and yeah. So
You said
if you didn't
pulleys
pack your
as well.
yeah
So actually, you've got
yeah we have
like
a
blocks with where you can run like.
well yeah, but not that big. You're
Okay, I'm imagining like
demonstrating like
sailing
a
pulley.
12. Yeah. No, I'm talking like little wheel pulleys
Oh,
that
okay.
5 mil cord and stuff like that. So yeah, we've got a little rope bag that we pull out if we need to. We've got like a tagline and a 5 mil cord and a couple carabiners and pulleys. Um, but yeah, it ends up being a pretty slick system to help get up rather than like trying to pull up a steep hill and then if someone loses it, they're getting run over by a toboggan.
Yes.
Not ideal.
No, not ideal. I have a couple of little things here. One, on your website, you, as part of your team, you have, and I might be pronouncing this wrong, Dr. Reisman. Dr. Reisman?
Mm-hmm.
It
Reisman, yeah.
Reisman, okay. It says on that team note that he joined you on one of the hardest trips that you've ever had.
Mm-hmm.
What was that trip?
Yeah, so that was our Missinaba Headwaters trip, and the reason it was 104 kilometers over 2 weeks. The reason it was so hard, it was it was so cold. Like I think the average temperature for that entire trip was like minus 30.
Wow.
Because usually we get the minus 30s, but it only lasts for a day or two, and then it will warm back up and then get cold again and then warm back up. But this trip was just consistently cold. Um, and also it was slushy. So when I was saying like the snow is a really good insulator
Yes.
and the water won't freeze underneath. Well, there was like just the perfect amount of snow to insulate that water from freezing, but not enough snow that like when our snowshoes compressed the snow, we didn't have enough to continue insulating it. So we would compress the snow and the slush would be there. So it
Ugh.
was like this sweet spot of when we would press the snow, the water would come up, then we would lift our snowshoe and it's minus 30. So that water just freezes to the snowshoes. And then the snowshoes become these blocks of ice. So then now they're compressing the snow even faster. And it would just accumulate ice on our snowshoes and our feet were getting wet. And like and the toboggans would just glue to the lake. Like we couldn't go. Like one day we went 200 meters. We packed up our our tent. We were ready to go, and it just looked like a war scene. We all tried to like pick our own path because normally we would have like, say we've got 10 people on the trip, 5 people could all walk in the same path without having that slush wick up.
Yes.
And then usually the sixth or seventh person, if it is slushy, would have to make their own path. So we'd have two lines of people kind of going side by side, and everyone would be able to make it through. I remember coming down this one portage, and as soon as we got to the base, there was slush. And so you just saw this branch of desperation, like just everybody fanning out and getting stuck at various stages. And I just remember like seeing this all go down. And there's really not a lot you can do. There's not really any risk of thin ice at this point. So what I do is I just like I go down, make my own path, and I'm just like really struggling, just like walking, just like and if you stop, you're dead. Like if you stop, it will freeze and you are just
Stuck.
you're frozen in like a dinosaur. I just remember like just like trudging through like don't stop, don't stop. And I'm like just like aiming for the bank. If I can get up on the bank, then like my toboggan is safe and I can go back and help people. I just remember just trudging through and being like, "I'll come back for you." Like just like these people have just like fanned out in desperation, just stuck. And I'm just like, "I'll come back for you. I'll rescue you. I just need to get my toboggan free." And like people are just taking their snowshoes off because they're like 30 pounds each. They're just standing in water. They're trying to bang their snowshoes with like, the snow and the ice and oh my God. And that has happened on multiple trips. Like I could be describing any trip to you right now, but like that particular trip, it just was constant. And then on top of that, um, we had four people from the UK come over, and they all came as a group, and we got word that one of the group father died, and so um, we often say to people like you need to really seriously consider whether you want any news from the outside world when you're on this experience because sometimes that news you can't do anything with, right? So um, you have to make that decision. Like if someone dies in your family or if something happens, like whether you actually want to hear about it during the trip or when you and wait until you get back. And he knew his father was sick, but one of the conditions of him going on the trip was that the doctor was like, no, like he should be fine, like you should go. And he just died suddenly. And he found out, so he wanted out. He wanted to leave. Um, and in Canada, like we have amazing healthcare, and if it was an emergency, the OPP would send a helicopter. Um, but because this was a non-emergency, we had to hire a private helicopter, and it was a particularly brutal winter. And anyways, it was a delay, and like it took a couple days to actually get them out. And the helicopter wouldn't land, and we had to leave. So his whole group wanted to leave. So it wasn't just him. So now we were losing three people, but we still had all of their stuff.
They can't take the sleds with
Um,
them, right?
yeah. So what we ended up doing is ditching the sleds, stashing them, and saying we're gonna come back. There was an emergency exit road. We were gonna come back with our snow machine and pick up the stuff that the helicopter couldn't take. Anyways, that turned into a bit of a nightmare itself. But we had to move on with four less people, and now we were like 3 days behind, and this was a type of trip where we had to catch the train. So now we were like, okay, like we're risking missing the train here. Um, Anyways, it ended up really well. We all came together as a group, really well, and the conditions started to get better. And we ended up making the train only to find out, like we were making it by like the hour, only to find out that the train was canceled because of a derailment. So then we were camped out at the side of the tracks for 3 additional days waiting for another train to pick us up. Um, so anyways, it was,
Wow,
it was
it sounds like a real
one
challenge.
thing after another. Yeah.
But that was also, I mean, you mentioned before, and this might be wrong, but also on that trip was Garrett, the person from the book that you, is that correct? Because I think
It was the same trip as in the same route,
but
but
it
it was
wasn't
a
that
different
trip.
year.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. That's what I must have just got my wires crossed there because I was like, that would have been the baptism of fire. The people who are like your like your guiding light star or whatever the expression is,
Mhm.
suddenly if they're there as well, and
Yeah,
then everything is just complete
going
chaos.
wrong. Wrong. No, but that trip with him was also a really challenging trip, and there was the film done on that particular trip as well. But yeah, we've had our fair share of challenges for sure.
But the thing I like is that you're telling all these stories and you're telling it with a big smile on your face.
Well, yeah, I mean it's type two fun, right? It's fun after
Which
after
I
the
think
word.
is possibly arguably some of the best fun that you can do.
100%.
I think sometimes if you can get to that point where you've done enough type 2 fun, I think you can almost start enjoying it in the moment as well, because you can just think about how funny it's going to be when you're looking back, or how good a story it's going to be.
And I
Almost.
think your gauge shifts too. Like, yeah, I mean, I do have to remind myself sometimes of like how intense and maybe crazy some of the things I do are, because your baseline shifts, right? Like
Yeah.
you may not have done this 10 years ago, but now it's like, nothing to even think about. So yeah, it does change a little bit as you go.
Yeah, I can only hope that my threshold continues to keep going up. But I'm sure it'll get to a point where maybe it's like,
Yeah, and then you get a little bit older, and sometimes you're like, yeah, I don't need to do that anymore.
maybe, yeah, today's a sofa day.
Mm, yeah.
Have you ever had any surprising animal encounters whilst out on these expeditions? I have a note here: polar bears? Question mark.
So there aren't any polar bears in any of the areas that we go to. They start fairly high up. Um, they're above the tree line,
Okay.
and we are always in the tree line. In order for our style of travel to work, we need trees.
Yes, to burn,
Uh-huh,
obviously.
uh-huh. We don't get many encounters like face to face. In the winter, everyone's just keeping to themselves, you know what I mean? Like they're just surviving. We did have a lynx come right up to our tent, which was pretty
Wow.
incredible. All the prints. We didn't actually see it face to face, but the next morning, there were all these prints outside of our tent, which was pretty amazing. We did see the lynx a little ways away from the tent afterwards. But and then we've had wolves again, sort of just around our camp, but never actually face to face. Um, and then of course we hear them howling all the time, which is amazing. We've seen moose fairly close, but no like encounter, as in like, hey,
Yeah.
we're like, who are you? What are you doing here? But we've had amazing, like I've had a snowshoe hare run through my legs before, because it was
Really?
running away from a marten chasing it. Um, that was pretty cool. And I've had snowshoe hare often. Like they for some reason out there it just seems like they don't have any fear. They'll just bound right up to you. I've taken some pretty amazing photos of them, just like, yeah, like right in front of me. Um, and
Is that because they're in an environment where they've never been around predation with humans, or
well, but yeah,
what's
I
going
mean,
on?
I don't know, like
There's got to be other predators around.
yeah, they're definitely used to being prey, but yeah, I guess I think just maybe the energy that you throw off too does matter. Like we're not hunting them right now, so it's just like, well,
Yeah.
you're just another, deer or something.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
but
That is definitely a thing.
yeah, as soon as yeah, exactly. Because like even at home, like I do hunt snowshoe hare, and the vibe changes, right? Like you have to give off the energy of a
Yep.
non-predator.
Yep.
Well, actually, I think I seen. Oh yeah, actually, on Alone, Joel gives the um the description of how you're supposed to hunt and like act like a bunny and then boom, turn and shoot.
But it's so true though, and I've definitely experienced that. To go down a little side alley of
Hmm.
hunting, I've had some amazing experiences, and it's always the times when you don't care.
Yeah,
If you're like, I'm not too worried. I don't think either. I'm like, oh, that's a ridiculous animal. I'm never going to have success. I'm never going to be able to get close to that thing.
yeah,
I'm just going to go and try and take some pictures or
yeah.
whatever. It's bizarre. I don't know what it is. The energy that you're putting out into the world, however that works. I don't know if it's electrical signals or something. Animals sense it. You're so right. And
Yeah.
I've had times where, yeah, I've said it before in other episodes where I've like walked right up to animals that are normally incredibly
Kiddish.
perceptive and
Yeah,
shy, and we've looked at each other,
yeah,
and it's been purely the vibe of like, oh, we're just two animals in the bush
yeah,
minding our own business,
yeah,
and then just suddenly changed at the last
yeah,
second and managed to lift my bow and make a shot.
yeah,
But it's such a remarkable thing, and like I wish that there was a way to really understand how to turn that lever in your brain. Maybe it gets easier with time, but when it
yeah.
happens, it's remarkable.
And that's why I'm not afraid of bears at all either, because you give them the vibe. They'll
Yeah, yeah.
you give them the vibe that you're just another, creature that's dominant but not aggressive, and they'll just, you'll just mind your own business. I had an amazing encounter with a porcupine last spring. I was able to just walk down to the pond, and there was the cutest. I think I have a video of it on
I think
our.
I've seen this video. Yeah.
It's just like the porcupine is just eating lily pads, and I just go right up to it. I'm like 6 feet away from it. It looks at me, it sees me, and it just carries on like going into the water and like reaching for lily pads and bringing them up and just munching on them. And I just like hung out with this porcupine, and it was the coolest thing ever. I don't know. It was like one of my favorite encounters that I've had.
And I think it's like there's something really magical and something I really appreciate about being in a bit more of a rural or wild environment is that every day I'm having little encounters with deer. As we were talking, a deer just walked past my window, and
Hmm.
and so it's just there's deer, there's rabbits, there's all these other little creatures, birds and things, and I think there's this magical thing that happens, isn't there, when you're in that moment of like interacting with an animal or watching it close up, you forget everything else, right? Like you are purely drawn back to that moment of presence. You're
Hmm.
not thinking about the jobs you have to do or how you're feeling or any
Yeah.
of that stuff,
Hmm.
I think that's the magic of nature.
Yeah.
So I think unless there's something that you're dying that or wishing that I'd asked you, it feels like a pretty good time for us to wrap things up today.
Yeah. No, I think it's been good. I have a very short memory, so like
Me too.
even just like from our past episode, I'm like, I'm not sure if we've talked about this or not, but like, yeah, no, I think
We can just keep doing the same episode again and again, and neither of us will have any idea.
yeah.
Uh, I guess one thing to ask is what expeditions and what trips do you have coming up? I mean, I know it's summer now, but
Mhm.
winter season, you've got to be.
Yeah.
I guess you're planning for trips for next year, or I guess
Yeah,
the
that
end of
reminds
this year.
me. Yeah, we've got to get our schedule up. Yeah, we got a little bit sidetracked. We were supposed to, well, we try and get it out for the solstice, so that'll be coming up this week. So, yeah, because usually we try and release our winter schedules when people are like, "Holy fuck, it's hot! I'm dreaming of winter."
Yeah, yeah,
And yeah, so this year we've got a little bit of a pared down season. Um, so we're doing our 2 week crossing of Tomogamy. We were supposed to do it last winter, which is the trip that ended up turning into that canoe sledding adventure. So we're crossing Tomogamy, which is an incredible
yes,
trip. It's one of my favorites. It's super varied in terrain. So there's like small creeks, um, big lakes, small lakes, medium-sized river, lots of portaging. Yeah, it's a fantastic route. and that's 2 weeks. And then we liked the canoe sledding so much that we're going to actually plan to do a canoe sledding trip, same route, because we liked that route so much. And that's an end of winter transition trip. And then, the Trans-Montgomery is a midwinter, and then we're doing an intro trip, our 1 week training camp and Vast Horizons trip, which is 3 days here and then 4 days out on the land. And then beyond that, we've got a couple private offerings, and we're not sure. We'll probably do a 1 week travel trip as well, but we haven't decided where we're going for that.
But that'll
So,
all be
yeah.
up on the website soon.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you, Kielyn. And
Yeah,
I guess
thanks.
maybe we should also say, seeing as we did it in the last last episode, but how can people find you? lureofthenorth.com, I believe, is the website.
Yep. Yeah, and then we're just at Lure of the North, also on Facebook and Instagram and YouTube as well. I just released a video from our canoe sledding trip, which we don't do a lot of videos, but I'm starting to be like, okay, I should probably get through some of my footage and put stuff out. So hopefully you'll see a few videos coming your way.
The struggle is real with that, isn't it? Like, I mean, I was like, I know, I'll buy some GoPros, and I have so much like amazing footage,
Yep.
and just finding the time to put everything together.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's hard. Like, it's fun to actually film it, but then like, oh, like I don't want to sit down and spend hours rooting through this. So yeah, but I don't. It's not going to be top production quality, but it'll be a fun story to tell, anyways.
Yeah, definitely.
Hmm.
Well, thank you again. And
Yeah,
if you get up to some mischief up there on the ice or something new happens, then by all means, you'd be very welcome to come back on and have a chat anytime.
yeah. Thanks so much for having me again, and yeah, wish you all the best in your future episodes and endeavors and adventures.
Well, thank you. Alrighty.
Alrighty.
Okay, that's another episode done and dusted. In the books. I'm trying to think of other phrases, but none are coming to my mind. Yeah, it was a good one. I want to say a big thank you again to Kielyn. I had a great time having the conversation and then also editing it just now. It was really fun. So, yeah, it was a good one. If you enjoyed the podcast too, then this would be a perfect moment. You're still here. Do us a favor and just quickly give yourself a pause moment and head over and subscribe and follow and do all those things that are available on your podcast provider. But also, if you want to head over to Instagram and give a follow, then that'll be great. You'll see what's coming out, what's going on, the adventures that I've been up to. We covered this a little bit in our chat just now, but I'll say it again. The information will be down in the show notes if you want to follow Kielyn, and Lure of the North if you want to go and check out their expeditions that they have available, their experiences. Then go to lureofthenorth.com. Also check out the same name on Instagram and Facebook. Show notes, all that info is there. Right? That's it for now. That's the episode. I'm sure there's probably something else I should have said, but I forget it now. Have to wait till next time. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Welcome to the Wild Dispatch.